I'm 65 years old. I spent 35 years as a financial consultant, and I'm going to tell you something that most people in my industry will never say out loud. Banks don't want you to retire comfortably. They want you to keep paying, keep borrowing, keep believing the system is designed to help you. It's not. And by the time most people figure that out, it's already too late. I almost made that mistake myself, but I watched it destroy someone I cared about first. Let me take you back. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My father was a mechanic. Good man, worked with his hands every single day until his knuckles were swollen and his back gave out. My mother worked part-time as a cashier at the local supermarket. We weren't poor, not exactly, but money was always tight. There was always a bill on the kitchen table that hadn't been opened yet. Always a conversation that got quiet when I walked into the room. I remember one night, I must have been 12 or 13, I heard my parents arguing, not screaming. Worse than that, whispering. The kind of whisper that means something is really wrong. My father said, "We'll figure it out." My mother said, "You always say that." And then silence. That silence taught me more about money than any textbook ever did. I told myself right there, sitting on the stairs in the dark, that I would understand money, that I would never feel that helpless. So I studied, worked part-time jobs through high school, got into a public university, studied economics, not because I loved numbers, because I was terrified of ending up like my parents, good people trapped by a system they didn't understand. After college, I became a financial consultant, not the kind you see on TV in a suit talking about hedge funds. I worked with regular people, teachers, plumbers, small business owners, single mothers. People who wanted one simple thing, to not be broke when they got old. And that's when I started to see it. The first thing I noticed, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit, was the way banks structured their products. Savings accounts that paid almost nothing, checking accounts loaded with fees, credit cards with interest rates that would make a loan shark blush, and all of it wrapped in friendly language. We're here to help you, your financial partner, building your future together. But when you looked at the numbers, really looked, the only future being built was theirs. I had a client once, his name was Gerald, a retired school teacher, 67 years old when I first met him. Gerald had done everything right, or at least everything he'd been told was right. He saved money in his bank savings account for over 30 years, put a little away every month, never missed. He was proud of that, and he should have been. That kind of discipline is rare, but here's what Gerald didn't know. For 30 years, his savings account earned less than 1% interest, some years less than 0.5%. Meanwhile, inflation averaged around 3%, which means every single year, Gerald's money was quietly losing value. He thought he was saving, but he was actually falling behind. The bank had his money. They lent it out at 5, 6, 7%. They made profit off Gerald's discipline, and they gave him pennies in return. When I showed him the math, what his money could have been worth if he'd put even a portion of it into a simple index fund, he went quiet. Not angry, just quiet. That kind of quiet that tells you something just broke inside a person. He looked at me and said, "So I did everything right and still lost?" I didn't know what to say, because the truth was, yes, he followed the rules, and the rules were designed for him to lose slowly enough that he'd never notice. That was the first time I realized, and the system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended, just not for you. Let me tell you about another pattern I saw over and over: mortgages. Now, I'm not saying owning a home is bad, but the way banks sell mortgages, that's where the theft happens in plain sight. I had a couple come in, Mike and Sarah, mid-30s, good jobs. They wanted to buy a house. The bank approved them for $350,000. They were thrilled, but I sat down with them and said, let's look at what this actually costs. Their mortgage was 30 years at a fixed rate. By the time they paid it off, they would have paid the bank over $600,000, almost double the price of the house. More than half of what they paid was pure interest. Not the house, not the land, just the cost of borrowing. And here's the part no one tells you. The bank structures the payments so that for the first 10 years, almost everything you pay goes to interest. You barely touch the principal, which means if you sell or refinance in year 7 or 8, like most Americans do, you've basically been renting from the bank the whole time. You just didn't know it. I told Mike and Sarah this. I showed them the amortization schedule, and Sarah said something I never forgot. She said, "Why doesn't anyone explain this before you sign?" I'll tell you why. Because if they explained it, you might not sign. And if you don't sign, they don't get paid. There's another one. This one's more subtle, and it might be the most dangerous of all. Retirement plans, 401ks, IRAs. Now, these can be powerful tools. I'm not against them. But here's what most people don't understand: the fees. You put your money into a 401k. Your employer might match a percentage, that's good, but the fund charges you a management fee, usually between 0.5% and 2%. Doesn't sound like much, right? Let me show you what it actually means. If you invest $500 a month for 30 years and your investments grow at an average of 7%, you'd end up with around $566,000. But if the fund charges you just a 1% fee, just 1%, you lose over $100,000. Not to bad investments, not to a market crash, to fees, quiet, invisible fees that nobody explains because they're buried in page 47 of a document you never read. $100,000 gone. That's years of retirement. That's the difference between comfort and worry, between freedom and dependence, and the fund manager gets paid whether your money grows or not. I spent years watching this happen, client after client. Good people making reasonable decisions based on information that was incomplete at best and deliberately misleading at worst. And that brings me to something I need to mention. Because after watching this pattern repeat itself for decades, I didn't just get angry, I did something about it. I sat down and put together everything I learned in 35 years about how the system really works against regular people. The real math, the hidden fees, the escape routes nobody talks about. I wrote it all down. I called it the Anti-Millionaire Retirement Plan. I'll explain exactly what it is at the end of this video. But if you don't want to wait, I pinned a link in the comments below. For now, though, let me finish this story, because the next part is the reason I wrote it in the first place. The moment that truly changed me, the one I carry every single day, was a man named Arthur. Arthur was one of my oldest clients. I'd worked with him for nearly 15 years. He was a carpenter, built things with his hands his whole life, beautiful work, custom cabinets, staircases, furniture. He wasn't rich, but he worked hard, raised 3 kids, loved his wife, Margaret. They had this little house with a garden that Margaret kept perfect, roses along the fence, tomatoes in the back. Arthur came to me when he was 52, said he wanted to make sure he could retire by 65. I looked at his finances. He had almost nothing saved. He'd been putting money into a savings account, like Gerald, and the rest went to bills, kids, life. I set up a plan for him. We started investing, modest amounts, consistent. I told him, if we stick to this, you'll be okay. And we did stick to it. For 13 years, Arthur was disciplined, never missed a contribution, never panicked when the market dipped. He trusted the process. He trusted me. Then, when Arthur was 63, Margaret got sick. Cancer. The treatment was brutal and expensive. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs were devastating. Arthur had to pull money from his retirement fund early. Penalties, taxes. In 18 months, nearly half of what he'd built over 13 years was gone. Not because he made bad choices, because life happened. And the system has no mercy for that. I sat with Arthur in his kitchen, the one he'd built with his own hands, and he said, "Robert, I don't think I'm going to make it to retirement." He didn't mean the money. He meant all of it. The exhaustion, the fear, watching the woman he loved suffer while the numbers on a screen got smaller and smaller. Arthur died at 64. 1 year before the retirement we'd planned together for over a decade. Heart attack. The doctors said stress was a factor. Margaret followed him 8 months later. I went to both funerals. And I stood there, in a cemetery in a suburb that looked like every other suburb. And I thought about all the years Arthur spent doing everything he was supposed to do. Save, plan, be responsible. And at the end, the system that was supposed to protect him just watched while it all fell apart. That was the day I stopped being a consultant who played by their rules. That was the day I decided, if the industry won't tell people the truth, I will. Here's what 35 years taught me. First, your savings account is not saving you. It's a parking lot for your money while the bank drives it around and keeps the gas money. If your money isn't at least keeping up with inflation, you're going backwards, every single year. Second, understand every dollar of interest you pay, on your mortgage, on your car loan, on your credit cards. Interest is the silent tax on people who don't read the fine print, and the banks count on you not reading it. Third, fees will eat your future alive. 1% here, 0.5% there. Over 30 years, those small numbers become enormous. Know what you're paying, ask questions, demand answers. If your financial advisor can't explain the fees in plain English, walk away. Fourth, and this is the most important one, you do not need $1 million to retire. I know that goes against everything Wall Street tells you. That's the point. The magic number myth exists because the longer your money stays in their system, the more fees they collect, the more interest they earn on your deposits, the more they profit from your fear of not having enough. The truth is, I've seen people retire with far less than $1 million, not because they got lucky, because they understood something most people don't. It's not about how much you have, it's about how much you actually need. And that number, your real number, is almost always smaller than what the industry wants you to believe. That's exactly why I wrote the Anti-Millionaire Retirement Plan. After what happened with Arthur, I couldn't keep this inside the walls of a consulting office anymore. I sat down and documented the exact math, step by step, that proves you don't need $1 million to walk away. I left a link in the pinned comment below. Read it. Run the numbers for yourself. Because nobody at your bank is going to do this for you. Nobody at your fund is going to show you this math. Their business depends on you never seeing it. The system is not coming to save you. That's not a threat, that's a gift. Because once you stop waiting for permission to live your life, once you see the real numbers, you realize the exit was closer than they ever wanted you to know. I'm 65. I've watched too many good people run out of time waiting for a finish line that was designed to keep moving. Don't be one of them.